Literary icons Rudyard Kipling and Nathaniel Hawthorne were both clerks before they became writers. And although I don't know whether my guest today has any interest in writing, I am sure she has been witness to a lot of incredible stories herself. I'm delighted to be joined today by the LA City Clerk Holly Wolcott. So nice to have you here.
So nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, so I sort of made a great literary allusion to, the kind of things that happen within the city of Los Angeles, because you literally, as the city clerk's office, make sure it's all documented, make sure that it's all there for posterity. But there are a lot of other things that the clerk's office does. So what are the huge responsibilities of what you all do?
Okay, the office of the city clerk has several business models, but first, as you alluded to, is we keep track of whatever happens in council and all the committees. So we will make sure that the agendas go out and then record and keep track of all items that go through the council. We have the Business Improvement District program that is an assessment program for different communities so that they can add services to their communities. We have our election division, which handles neighborhood council elections and various responsibilities for the city election process. We have our records management that digitizes and keeps track of all of the historical documents and any records before they need to be destroyed. They're held off-site. We have our neighborhood council funding program, and also we do the payroll and personnel systems for not only ourselves, but for the mayor, council, and 6 other departments.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. Let's start with the basics.
Okay.
Let's start with the basics of, taking all the minutes of every council meeting, et cetera. I always imagine sort of like a court reporter setting, where someone's sitting there doing, but how is it done? I mean, do you have a couple people in there? Do you have one person in there? And, how do you make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and every word is accounted for?
Well, all meetings are recorded, both all the city council meetings are videoed and also recorded, audio recorded. But we have a council clerk that's in there that helps run the meeting and a voting clerk in there that keeps track of the votes. When the meeting is complete, we put out what is called a journal, and it basically has the action items. So rather than keep specific notes, although they did do that in the early days, and we have records of where they would keep, as you're saying, what everybody said. But now it's just item by item, what happened to that item. So if it was passed, if it, and then there's various double checks by individuals that check against the video.
Very cool. Okay, so there's that transcription of what's happening. And then are those public records people can access?
Yeah, it's called a journal.
Okay.
So if you look up for it'll do it by date and it'll do it by item. So you can always check. There's keyword searches you can do to check for an item. Oh, but each individual item will have a specific number that's identified. I mean, a lot of other clerk's offices or county offices, they do it by date, but we do it by specific items so that you can always find that specific topic that you're looking for. But the journal is published, by date.
The whole realm of metadata.
Yep.
All those keyword searches. Okay. And then the other thing that you were talking about, which is a real critical component of what you do, is, the support for elections. And how does that play into the LA City Clerk's office? What exactly does your office do when it comes to city elections?
Okay, well, in 2020, we did consolidate with the county. So the county actually does the vote centers and the polling locations and things like that. But what we do is on the front side is we handle all of the candidate filing, and we also, any measures that the city puts on to the ballot, we will make sure that gets onto the ballot, and then we'll do our own voter information pamphlet that you will receive in the city of Los Angeles that talks about the city measures and what's on the ballot regarding city measures. And then we'll also do outreach.
Okay, and along those lines, outreach is a huge component of that, to make sure that sort of generating awareness and interest in elections. And I know that was a big priority for your office. How has that been created, and what does it look like to the common citizen when they're seeing things about the elections?
Well, what we do is, number one, we hire a staff that is bilingual in the 12 different languages, or we try to get all 12, somebody who speaks both English and, say, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, the whole gamut. And we go out to low propensity areas, whether it be senior citizens or even the incarcerated, we'll go to the convention center and register to vote new citizens. So we're just always looking for ways through community groups or even through our neighborhood councils to, identify the low propensity voters and make sure that they have an opportunity to register to vote.
But in that regard, I think it's kind of important to clarify that the clerk's office has no, you can't change policy, or you can't make, it's all what has already been established and what has already been presented. There's nothing that the office can do. So how was that explained? How would I say that more clearly?
We're a non-political, non-partisan office.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to get information out that's factual. We're not trying to sway you to vote one way or another. We're just trying to make sure you have the opportunity to vote.
Very cool. And then one of the things that you mentioned, and frankly, I am learning about this. I've had a couple opportunities to get a little bit of information, but a critical part of Los Angeles, because we're so huge and so diverse, are these neighborhood councils. And these neighborhood councils have become a real important part of disseminating information and understanding what different neighborhoods need. How does your office help with these community council elections, et cetera?
Well, we do two things for the neighborhood councils. We do run their funding program every year. And also, as you said, every 2 years, on odd number of years, so the last time was 2023, we run the neighborhood council elections. So there's 99 neighborhood councils. Now, they may not all have elections on a given year. It'll depend on if they have enough people to run. But we'll handle their candidate filing, and we'll do all of the polling locations. In 2023, all neighborhood councils were allowed to also vote by mail, as well as in person or drop-off boxes. So we made sure that there were various different ways that people could vote if they were interested in these different, and we ran them by regions. We would do 7 at a time, 7, 12 at a time in different areas of the city.
99 neighborhood councils.
There's 99, but again, I don't know that I couldn't tell you the number off the top of my head of the number that we actually ran this past year, but it was in the neighborhood of, I think, 70, 80% of that.
Do you happen to know, this is not in the ballywick of what your responsibilities are, but what are the responsibilities of the neighborhood councils? Do you have any idea of, how they're created? What do they do, and how do they help the city of LA understand the city of LA?
Well, the idea of the neighborhood councils was that each area of the city might have different needs. So, what the West Valley versus, San Pedro might need is something completely different. So it was to come from them, how they wanted to form, what their structure was. They are given $32,000 a year. They can do neighborhood purpose grants. They can, identify needs in their own communities and communicate that back to the mayor and city council of the city, or fund different projects on their own.
Wow. All right, and that kind of leads me into the whole business plan thing. So what is that area in the LA City Clerks,
the business improvement districts? Well, there's districts throughout the city. A good example would be in historic downtown LA. And basically, the idea is that the property owners assess themselves. They vote to assess themselves. There's what's called a Prop 218 balloting, which we also run. But they vote they give us a ballot of whether they want to have this assessment, and the assessment goes on the county tax rolls. And then it funds services like when you see this extra security or extra cleanup or the ambassadors that are helping people. So different areas decide that, they want to fund extra services that the city can't provide. And so they assess themselves, and we make sure they get the money and that they follow the state law.
And along those lines, wrapping it all up, you have all of this documentation. You have all of this information. And you're responsible for making sure that it's safe and available for time and eternity. Back from those scribes to actually, your audio tapes that have been transcribed. How is that process going? I mean, how far back are you looking right now? How much has been done, and what are you hoping to do to make sure that, the next 20 LA City clerks can look back and say, well, when Holly was in charge, this is what happened.
Well, what we do is we have all the now documents digitized and are in our council file management system, and we've been able to go back in time and continue to digitize, but we're back to 1994 right now. So we go back a year about every year. So next year it'll probably be 93, et cetera. Sometimes we get a year and a half, 2 years, depending on the records. But that's all the council file. And we're trying to digitize all the council file meetings and put them up on YouTube so that those are accessible to the, common computer
Absolutely.
user. Other files are digitized as needed, but definitely all the council files are being digitized to put up online, and both in our council file management system and then certain broadcasts of the meetings onto the YouTube
How
channel.
far back do these records go, by the way?
We go back to the 1890s.
Really?
So if you go into the archives, you'll see some of the original council meetings in Spanish. So
Have
it's
you
pretty
just,
fascinating.
I would imagine maybe you get enough of this during a daily, on a daily workday, but do you ever just go back and you're curious to see what happened in 1907 or something like that?
Well, we have an archivist who pretty much knows some of this stuff off the top of his head.
Wow.
So he's a fascinating person to talk to. His name is Michael Holland, and he's our archivist. And he's very good about digitizing incidences in the city that, it may have been some large police action that we'll be keeping in perpetuity, so he will digitize those files. And so, I've gone over there and looked, but the master of what's in there is Michael Holland.
Wow. So, obviously, the politics of the city change all the time, and your office works under the new mayor, everything like that. So has there been differences in priorities according to a new mayor, and does the office change slightly based on who is actually mayor of the city at the time, or is this a stable, steady, no matter who's there, no matter, what's going on in the city office?
It's a combination of both. Part of the transition will be bringing on new personnel and transitioning out old personnel.
Mm-hmm.
That part is pretty stable, and we're used to that, whether it's a new council member or a new mayor.
Mm-hmm.
All of the admin rules, making all the payments on contracts or other purchases, that remains stable. But, for example, Mayor Bass's top priority has been housing the homelessness. So making those payments is a responsibility of our office. Mm-hmm. And that has been a huge change because of the workload has been so high. Mm-hmm. But the actual process doesn't change, if that makes sense. So what we're paying may change, but we're still doing the same personnel or accounts payable and then other issues. If, for example, every department is required to have an equity plan. So that might be a priority. So we'll band together and put together our equity plan and so things that fall across all departments.
All right, so you've been in government a long time. What prompted your interest in this particular office in the first place?
Interestingly enough, I started at the office of the city clerk. And it was just one of those out of college jobs that seemed interesting when I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And then it's just fascinating to be on the edge of where everything happens. I mean, we're not necessarily the catalyst or a part of what is happening, but we're watching it and recording it all. So it's fascinating to be on the sidelines, I guess, and having a front row seat to what's happening in city government.
Absolutely, and to just be, like I said, to be witness to all of these stories. Right. I mean, is there anything that, when you've been, as part of your tenure, have you been witness to something and been part of something that you realized, this is historic, this is something that people are going to celebrate in years to come. I mean, obviously, controversy is something recognizable all the time. Right. But, when there's a moment to celebrate Los Angeles, when there's a moment to look at something that has happened, that you realize, I am here because I am responsible for documenting all of this, and I am grateful to be here.
I find that swearing in Mayor Bass was fascinating. I mean, just to swear in the first woman into office of the mayor, that was a huge honor. So every time I get to swear in any official, it's I feel grateful, but especially when there's more women that join, because for so long, the underrepresentation.
Yeah. Well, we can certainly see that in the council. There seems to be, a direction headed in a certain way. We can see that with the supervisor's office. But the thing that I also wanted to say, and then you mentioned, swearing in. There are a couple ways that, swearing in. There's the official, and then there's the ceremonial. So, wherein lies the difference between the two?
Well, per the charter, the city clerk provides the official oath. So after an election has been certified and the council has declared the result, at that point in time I can swear in any council member. I also swear in all department heads and commissioners, or my office does if I'm not personally available. But that doesn't always allow for the community to be involved. And so what many of them will do is have a ceremony out in their districts or in public. So when I swore in Mayor Bass, it was in my office on a Saturday, but then the big televised event was the ceremonial. And actually the presidency's handled the same way. What you witness on television is ceremonial.
Wow. Do you have any idea how many city officials you've sworn in?
Oh gosh, no.
I mean,
we have 46 volumes of signatures. I mean, obviously, I've only been involved in this 46th volume, but there's books going back that we have people sign when they're sworn in, and we're almost to the end of the 46th volume, and that dates back to 2000. So I'm not really sure the number, though.
This is, a little on the woo-woo side, but what's the emotion in a room in which you have someone, maybe for the first time, taking an office, taking the oath of an office, or someone who has, made history like Mayor Bass? What is that moment? Because you said it's just you and them, or you and a small group of people. What is the emotion like in a situation like that? What is that moment like for both parties?
Well, it's usually especially thrilling when their parents, can make it. But if they have family, to watch the family's faces, they're so proud. And, it's been such a long road. Generally, the campaign trails are never easy. And so it's a culmination of where they've come from and where they are now. So it's an honor and a thrill to be involved in, and to see the emotion on their faces.
And how exciting to be witness to that type of history.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Did you realize that was part of the opportunity that was going to be provided to you when you took the position?
I did, because I had worked for the city clerk before.
Oh, that's right. We talked about that. You had actually started in the city clerk's office.
Yeah, now I worked various other departments, but, ended back in the city clerk in 2004. So I've been back almost 20 years of my 36 years, so.
Wow. You going to write it all down? I mean, I know I made a joke about that when we were starting this whole
You know what? I'll have to think about that.
Because you have to think, and speaking of thinking, because you have seen things that others have not. And Los Angeles is such an exciting place, and, you have the resources. I'm not telling you to write a book, but you might want to consider it.
I'll take that under consideration.
At least a coffee table book of all the photos.
Right.
Exactly. One of the things that I really enjoyed learning about you is that, although, this is something that you're obviously very devoted to, you also have other passions. And one of those passions is theater. How do the two meet up a little bit there?
Well, I am involved in community theater. I want to make it clear that this is
right.
strictly a volunteer effort. And this year we're doing Mary Poppins out in Northridge in November. If anybody wants to see it, I'll do my quick little plug. But I would say the commonalities is, know your script and be able to improv, be able to turn on a dime, keep smiling and keep your energy up. So those probably are the commonalities, and fake it till you make it, because there's occasions where you didn't know something was going to happen and you just have to, and cover for other people. That's probably the other.
I was going to say the teamwork thing.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that you learn very carefully and very clearly when you're working in a crew setting or a theatrical setting is the need. Everybody needs each other. Nobody's alone on that stage.
Absolutely, it's a huge group effort.
Yeah, and so what are some of the within your office? What is the makeup? How many people work with you, for you, and speak to you?
The office of the city clerk, I believe, has about 115 authorities right now, scattered throughout City Hall, or then we also have offices out at the Piper Tech Center. Our elections and records management's out there. But the rest of the staff's at City Hall, so there's 115 of us.
And they're
do all the
everything
heavy
you
lifting.
just listed, yeah. What are you doing to sort of? I know part of the election campaign was to invigorate, more young people to get involved in elections or be cognizant and aware. But what is it like in your office to sort of re-engage the youth in just city government, et cetera? How is that working with the city clerk's office?
Well, our outreach and engagement in elections will work with the youth department and do various activities together in order to make sure that the youth, those that are 16 and older, can pre-register to vote, and so that they're ready to vote when they turn 18. They don't have to, go and do something. They'll automatically just start getting their ballots when they turn 18. So the idea is, what's at stake with a ballot? I mean, what are you voting on? Why is it important to you? Those are the kind of messages we try to, because federal elections can be sort of sexy and everybody understands, the President of the United States, but really it's locally, it's your local council and mayor that decide where resources go, what streets get paved, where there's stoplights. A lot of those things get handled on a very local level, and that's why it's really important to make sure your interests are represented. And so we try to make sure that the youth understand that. We've gone to various schools and made presentations on how to vote and worked through Channel 35 to make some videos of outreach.
Yay, 35.
Yeah.
And, we're wrapping up this fiscal, but you've had some pretty remarkable achievements and goals over the last 4 years that you had strategically planned and into this year. What are some of those priorities that you put into action, and how are they working out?
Well, what we're always trying to do is make sure that transparency is at the forefront. So digitizing what we do to make sure it's on the internet and that it's able to reach the people via the way they look for information. So our systems division has had a huge impact in making that information available, as we talked earlier, our records management, digitizing records. So I'd say that's one of our big wins. We've also changed over our system in council, which doesn't mean anything to anybody outside. Hopefully they still have the same experience, but now the information's easier to keep track of and get out in a more timely manner. But that's what we're always working on, is trying to make sure our office is efficient, so that really we're behind the scenes and you don't know what we do. Because if you do know what we do, then sometimes we're doing something wrong.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And that's another thing, is the keeping up with the technology, I imagine, is something that's a priority, because everything's changing so rapidly that it's a benefit and a curse at the same time.
Sure, and we try to stay on the edge of that so that we always have a way to make sure that every citizen who needs or wants information can receive it from us.
So if someone wanted to watch, or read or do anything regarding any of the documentation that the LA City Clerk's office, Are there social channels that you guys are on currently? And, YouTube channel you mentioned, obviously 35. What's the list of locations that people can access all this wonderful information that you have captured?
We are on all social media platforms. But if you go to our website at clerk.lacity.gov, it'll provide all the information on where you can find us and our different, we're on Facebook or Instagram. You can find where we are.
And what do you want people to ask the city clerk's office? I mean, what are some of the things that would be helpful to you if a citizen, any of your constituents, had something that they wanted to suggest or offer? I mean, what helps you and what do you not want to hear about?
I want to know if they're having difficulty obtaining the information that they're trying to find. So we have a way for them to subscribe to different agendas or different items. You can either, if you want to subscribe to the public safety agenda, you can do that. Or if you want to subscribe to council agendas, you can do that. Or an item on the agendas, you can do that. But what I need to know is, if the system's down and I don't, I'm not right there, let me know immediately. Or, if you're unable to find what it is you're looking for, we should be able to direct you to where to find that.
You can subscribe?
You can subscribe to all agendas or into individual
So there's
items.
a subject matter that incredibly is interesting to me and or applies to me in something I'm doing. I can subscribe and I don't even have to go. It'll just come into my email box.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. So once again, the website.
It's clerk.lacity.gov.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Holly. This is fascinating. And I'm dead serious. You've got to write this book.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Holly. And that's a wrap on this fascinating LA Currents.